Okay, I'm Lola Arias. I'm a director and a playwright from Argentina, and I'm presenting The Year I Was Born in Under the Radar. It was very well received, and it was very polemic also in terms of, because it's a portrait of a society which is still divided, in terms of how do we judge the dictatorship, how do we elaborate the dictatorship. There's people still saying that Pinochet wasn't really a criminal, and he was so good for the economy and so good for the country and so on. So there are still discussions about how to elaborate this recent story. So somehow I think it was very interesting to see how people discussed about the piece afterwards and how they relate their own stories with the stories of the performers. And they were saying, I also was on exile, or I also had a father who was in the police and I never knew what he did during this time, and so on. So everybody felt in a way involved with the story. So that I think it was interesting. When we are traveling abroad, I mean, it's a very local story. It's the story of Chile and it's the story of these people. But of course, the topics that they are talking about are universal in the terms of relationship father-mother, and in terms of what it is to live under a totalitarian regime. You can associate it with other political situations all over the world. So yeah, it's a portrait of Chile, and it's a portrait of a generation of young people who were born during the dictatorship, but it's at the same time a piece about family stories, a piece about politics and life, and what's the relationship between life and politics, and many other topics. Whenever you perform this piece in a new context, people associate with different things, with different stories, or with the history of the country, or with the political situation that you're living in. So it was very, it's always interesting to see how people think about their own situation now, and what it is liberty and what it is not being like free, and how are we dominated by other regimes which are maybe not so obvious as the totalitarian regime of Pinochet, but they can associate with other forms of control, and censorship, and people being treated as terrorists or being persecuted because of their political ideas. So in this sense, it's always interesting to hear like people associating with the history of the country. Performing here, it's also a challenge, because of course you're telling a story that is not so well known, but the piece has a very playful way to make all this information available to people that maybe doesn't know so much about Chile, and in a way, because it's so personal and they are talking about themselves and their parents, there's no way that you don't get involved. It's not like going to a history class. It's more like going to the dinner of someone's family, and then you get to know the stories of the family. It was obviously a question when I did the Argentinian piece, that everybody said, why you are doing a piece about your own generation, telling the story of people who were born in the same years as you were born, and you are not telling your own stories. So that's why after making Mi Vida Después, I did another piece which is called Melancolía y Manifestaciones, which is a piece in which I tell the story of my mother.
Oh, so we'll just...
So, no, basically, I'm a daughter of a literature teacher and an architect, and my mother was pretty much a left-wing thinker. But in a way, she wasn't really involved in politics, but she was affected by dictatorship in a way that I think it's very interesting to think about, because she was depressed from the 76 on for like a very long period of depression. And so sometimes you think about the consequences of a political regime only in terms of exile, prison, you know, like very obvious things, but you never think about like maybe somebody can get depression out of a dictatorship. Maybe somebody is not able to deal with it in a way that has to go back to bed and wants to stay there forever, you know, that someone doesn't want to confront with this situation. So that's the story of my mother. She lost her work in the university. She was a literature teacher, and she lost her work, and since then she started with this depression that lasted until now. So the whole piece is about what is the relationship between like depression, melancholia or melancholy, and politics in a way. So manifestaciones means like demonstrations, so it's like how somebody can react in a way, in a very I don't know, a very internal way, in a very introspective way, or somebody can deal in a more offensive, active way. This is a typical journalist question.